Welcome to my video on the 2010 movie Burnt by the Sun Exodus. I'm gonna start with a review that's gonna contain zero spoilers for this one. I will be spoiling the first one. And then I will get into what I call the thoughts section, where I spoil everything about this one as well. The movie is rated R, so will this video be. And yeah, I really love this one. So this is something that my father and I have been meaning to watch for some time now, and now we got around to it. Of course, we did not check to see that it was not, so if I understand correctly, the start of a miniseries, which I have not, my wrists are really, really sore right now, so I have not checked yet if I can watch that anywhere. I would like to, but yeah, this is not a complete story in and of itself. Oh, also, apparently, there's more than one version of this, and the one I watched is 2 hours and 27 minutes, not 3 hours. But I suppose that pretty much, yeah, at least as I record this, it's possible I will not upload it immediately. My dad and I recently rewatched the original from the 1990s, 1994, I want to say. And yeah, um, actually on that Arts Cafe, longtime friend, supporter of the channel, said that this was even better. Although right now I'm slightly unsure if he meant this movie specifically or the miniseries, because it is a little bit confusing. There's technically two movies called Burnt by the Sun 2, and one of them also has the title Exodus and is, the immediate sequel to the first. And then there's one that has the subtitle Citadel, which is the sequel to this one. And then there's one that just is called Burnt by the Sun 2 and is the miniseries. So yeah, but yeah, he said that this was even better, and yeah, it's I was really impressed by this. So I think we're gonna get into the let's see. Yeah, good place to start is the writing. So I thought they did a good job here of as soon as I found out there even was a sequel, um, I immediately was not sure how that was possible, because the first one, I mean, there's several things. The first one seems like such a complete story. Like, I wasn't sure how you add anything to that. And the other thing is that the first one, you can't really, I mean, I don't know. If I had to guess right now, I don't think anything in the miniseries tries to go against the following. The first movie kind of feels like you can only really do that once per franchise. You can't really, and I don't even think you could do it after the first entry in a franchise, because it's got this thing of, yeah, I know I talked about the following in my video on the first one, so I'll keep it brief here. But just to say, in the first one, it starts out with this very cheery, chipper kind of thing, and then gradually we see more and more signs that things are indeed bad in the Soviet Union. And obviously, once you've done that in one movie, then if you make a sequel to that movie, how can you really do that again? So here they opt for something quite different, whilst maintaining this thing of, you know, trying to find something positive even though things are really bad, which I understand to be not exclusively a Russian thing, but part of Russian, you know, yeah. I do really hope one day Russia will have a very extensive period of democracy and not having a dictator. And I don't know. I just in case, I will say the following. Obviously, I support Ukraine, not Putin in this. It feels wrong to even say I don't, support Russia. I mean, it's Putin who's doing this. A lot of Russians don't want him to try to invade Ukraine. Anyway, the right. I'll just briefly note now that it's come up. I quite appreciated, Trump tried to convince Zelensky to go to Moscow, which is obviously yeah, holy shit, dude. Sometimes it's difficult to tell if Trump is just that ignorant or if he is just lying about, like obviously that would be a bad idea for Zelensky to do. Putin kills people working for him. Like, you think he's not gonna try to do something to the leader of the country he's trying to invade when the latter is winning? But yeah, Zelensky's response was absolutely perfect. Something to the effect of, it's not safe in Moscow right now. There's too many Ukrainian drones. I forget who, might have been Trevor Noah, but someone said, we need more world leaders that are comedians. I concur. Do you concur? I know it's what the patient said. Do you concur? And yeah, so basically this one is set years after the original, during World War II, instead of, in the 30s. And that is a really clever way, because yeah, you do have this thing of those are two of the most, you know, the periods that are best to comment on as far as criticizing the Soviet Union. And yeah, I think that does pretty much. So yeah, there is quite good setup and payoff in this, and I guess I will briefly note, and this is not a criticism, this is a neutral, informative, hopefully informative, meant to be informative statement. You should, if you can, if you're going to watch this, you should try to watch the first one first. Because while I would say that by and large you can follow this one without, I would definitely say it hits harder. There are some flashbacks, but it definitely, I mean, how are you going to sum up, the first one's also like 2.5 hours or thereabouts, how are you going to sum that up in another, 2.5 hour? That's just not, you'll miss stuff. And yeah, the tension and suspense is fantastic. And since it is World War II, some of that means like literal, like, the enemy is nearby kind of thing. Or the other side of this military conflict. But there is also, there are situations where it is just, yeah, Stalin's Soviet Union was extremely dangerous. And yeah, the psychological accuracy is quite good. We have characters who, you might not have guessed where they are in this, even having watched the first. But when you see it, it tends to feel, justified and make sense. And in a lot of ways, it is very authentic to how it really was back then in that particular context. and it also stays completely true to itself. And it is also, it also as a sequel to the first one, it feels like it's not really trying to move away from that. You could say that it is um it does not take terribly long to get to some of the most, you know, unpleasant stuff in the film where the first, you know, did. I think that does, which once again just feels like it, if this had the same pace as the first, that would feel off. Now, I think yeah, a good level of detail. There are things included that, yeah, just help convey things about the characters and the plot and such. I thought they did a good job finding something compelling to do for the returning characters. I didn't necessarily really feel like anyone was like overlooked. Um, yeah, I think that pretty much brings us to the I also really appreciated, so since years passed between these two being made, you know, which apparently, like, I read on IMDb trivia that that was actually that was something that the star and writer director wanted, and the yeah, so yeah, because years between the two stories. It could be very awkward if you pretend like, oh, this is taking place like right after. And it also, I don't know that there would really be a story right after that would be worth like 2.5 hours. And yeah, the dialogue is again great. I do not speak Russian or German, so I'm going off subtitles, and occasionally there were at least sometimes where the characters would talk for several seconds and the translation, the subtitles into Danish would seem to suggest at least something was missed. But yeah, like genuinely um, compelling, and also like I would say I nearly always understood why someone was saying or doing what they were, and it's also delivered quite well. So the direction, I've already mentioned that in some ways this is different from the first. In some ways this feels more like a straight, like, war story than the first. And that's not really a criticism. Once again, it's just a neutral, just an observation. And I say it to get into the following. I was very impressed by how it handled that. My father and I have watched quite a lot of anti-war media, and yeah, this really absolutely nailed. Um, I think I'll go more into detail later, but it yeah, and let's see. Yeah, so there are a number of scenes here that are a bit more dark and gloomy than the first, more bright kind of, which works well for the contrast. The first one was they are still living the lie, and then by this one, suffer no illusions. This is this is bad. This is a bad situation that they're just stuck in and trying to make the most of. And once again, not exclusively Russian, but it does feel like yeah, that is also something, I have mentioned before. I've watched um, Andrei Rublev and Solaris, both masterpieces by Andrei Tarkovsky, and they are they both have that element of, you know, yeah. And let's see, I guess that does pretty much, yeah, the cinematography is great with some very daring shots, and it's never less than impressive. And both it and the editing show a full mastery of what you can do with these. And yeah, as far as the editing, there is some cutting between different situations, which also, I mean, oh, well, let's see. I guess in the first one, it's basically, it is a day in the life of this family. So sometimes it'll cut to other family members, but here there's something else also. And yeah, I thought it worked quite well. And yeah, I really appreciated the way that it's willing to sometimes let a shot last a while, maybe let a scene breathe, that sort of thing. But then at other times, it's very intense and unforgiving, and it just felt like the randomness of war is captured really well, from what I understand. I've never been, thankfully, but they really do nail that. Sometimes people get to just, I mean, I hesitate to say relax, but sometimes there's a bit of time without anything terribly dramatic happening, and then you know sometimes within moments something horrible has. And yeah, I was impressed by the production value, set design, locations, costumes, and makeup. They convey things about the characters. Maybe you see where someone is spending a lot of time, or you know, that sort of thing. And yeah, it definitely does not feel like they had to, you know, skip out on anything. Like everything really feels like it had the budget that it required. And they did great both on, building sets and discovering, or scouting locations and such. And yeah, the music is also very effective, and continue to appreciate that it is, Russian. They're not trying to make it something that appeals more to Westerners or something. And the sound design is also fantastic. There's some really choice pieces that, yeah, very unpleasant. And yeah. So this does introduce new characters, and, at least some that we already knew from history and such. And I don't know that I would really say anybody got lost in the shuffle, and is also not trying to have, like, it's not trying to fit in too many characters. Like, if you look at just the number of characters who do something that changes things in this, it might sound too big, but some of them don't have so much screen time that it becomes, overwhelming. And yeah, the acting is still phenomenal, and it was really cool seeing, the various yeah, returning faces, you know, so many years later. And I think that might just about, yeah, so the pacing is great. There's not a boring second to be found in this. Special effects and stunts are really, really effective. I appreciated that they clearly did what they could to make it practical, and that really gives us some deeply memorable sequences that I will go into in the thought section in detail. And yeah, it's also, as a anti-war piece of media, it understands, there is that there's a quote that's I forget who was it, Truffaut? Might have been Truffaut. Someone who knows film at one point said that it is impossible to make an anti-war film because war is inherently too exciting. I believe I've expressed before, while I respect the person who said it and their opinion, I do disagree, but it is definitely worth keeping in mind that it requires great care to accomplish. But this one definitely does get it. Like, I was somewhat reminded of some of the German anti-war movies. Downfall, The Bridge, both versions. Oh, right. Is that one of those cases where there's more than two versions? I'm talking about the old one from, like, was it the 30s maybe or something? And then I want to say 2008, the Franca Potente version. And yeah, they did a really great job never letting it become, like, there are times where we can tell, okay, this is cathartic for the character, this, you know, war act. But we are not sitting there, like, cheering them on because of how it's framed. And yeah, just the quality, variety, and delivery of the elements of, like, anti-war and, like, dramedy still really work incredibly well. And I also appreciated that, so there are some pieces of media out there that, like, once they have an R rating, they kind of just say, well, you know, why not include this other thing as well, since, and while I can appreciate that mindset, and sometimes it leads to really, you know, good stuff, here I really appreciate their restraint. I never felt like something was there just because, well, whatever, we already have an R rating. It always felt deliberate, which is also important when you are showing the horrors of war. You really don't want, it's so important not to numb the audience. And there are times in this where they stop just short of, like, I was very impressed. They don't cross that line, in my opinion. And yeah, I guess that pretty much. So yeah, um, this is indeed even better than the first movie, and I'm gonna look into if I can watch the rest of, so the miniseries is probably what I'm gonna see if I can find. Yeah, also, I guess I also need to check if I watch the other movie, if that means I'll have watched the equivalent of the miniseries. But yeah, I'll look into it. No promises yet. Sometimes stuff like this can be difficult to find around here. Anyway, I guess that does cover. Yeah. Um, I rate this 10 devastating stories of horrible things happening tied to the same small group of characters out of 10. And that brings us to the thoughts section. So from here on out, I'm spoiling everything about this movie. I'm going to try to keep it more or less chronological. So I will say at first I was wondering how a movie like this was made during Putin's reign. But yeah, if I understand correctly, according to IMDb trivia, there were some threats uh, because from hard Stalinist groups. But the opening is truly perfect here because so we have this thing of you know we have Kotov and I'm afraid I forget her name, his wife, the mother of Nadia, and then we also have Stalin and some of the inner circle, including Beria. And I mean, in a way, this felt like right out of the death of Stalin. You have like the inner circle trying desperately to keep Stalin from exercising his temper and limitless power at this place and time. And yeah, just there's so many great things here. So I think yeah, one thing I want to note is it felt like the last vestiges of the first one, of the dream, because it has a very similar vibe. Kotov is smiling, it is sunny, and it is of course tempered with the fact that like we immediately recognize that's Stalin. That is, yeah. And I mean, you don't even really have to know much. That is one thing you don't technically need to have watched the first movie. If you know anything about Stalin, yeah, incredibly destructive. um I'm right to briefly I do want to acknowledge some of what has been said about the Soviet Union is anti-communist propaganda. Um, I'd say Cavernacle is probably the YouTuber I've found to be one of the best, at least, at addressing some of this. Yeah, that does not mean that we support the Soviet Union. And it is just one of those things of like, considering how bad the Soviet Union was, why do you feel the need to lie? Like that really suggests you feel like your position is weak. So, that might be something worth examining. Anyway, yeah, so we have the thing about, let's see, first we have I would say it's called spread, the spreading of the marmalade or something. And immediately there's a fly, and that's of course like, yeah, that sometimes happens if you're out in the hot summer and you've got something sugary like that out in the open, and like everyone can tell that thing's gonna land directly on the food, if not, and what is he gonna do? And for a while he just sits there letting it happen, amused by everyone else nervous, and Kotov like tries to smoothly just like blow at it to get it to fly away. Doesn't really work. And then, Stalin is talking about like the nostalgia, which was something that, like other dictators, he appealed to nostalgia. And yeah, there was this element of yeah, he starts like basically going eeny meeny miny mo as for who is going to have to pay for this, you know. And then they bring in the cake, which looks just like Stalin and looks like it took a long time to make. And just immediately we can tell something's going to go wrong. And like my first thought was, are they going to drop it, maybe even into the water or something? Because it's clearly heavy, but they do manage to put it in front of him. And then, there's that thing of like, wait, if we cut into that, is that an insult to Stalin? And that again, just like, yeah, if you haven't already watched The Death of Stalin, because it is this thing of like, they're trying so desperately to keep him happy. And, I mean, that is a thing with a number of, you know, dictators, whether real or wannabe. And I don't know. I mean, we're seeing with Trump right now, like people are desperately trying, and he makes it impossible at times and just very detrimental most of the rest of the time. And yeah, because at the same time, like if you bring a cake and it doesn't have Stalin's face on it, it's like, I'm sorry, do you not love the dear leader? And then, she screams, Kotov, where is Nadia? And that's when it becomes completely clear, oh, this is a nightmare, because like that was, I was gradually getting that sense. But I love how much, like, this scene is several minutes long. And it's really only at the very end that something like definitive happens, and then it's revealed to just be a dream, but the tension and the way that yeah, because like it's not boring, but it's a scene that takes its time, and that again feels the right way to transition between these two uh, takes on the same characters and such. But yeah, he grabs Stalin and tries to, let's see, I guess it's called suffocate. It's not drown, right? In the cake. And yeah, it is essentially this PTSD nightmare. This is what, like, something like this may well have happened, or may West have happened, but now he's like, why didn't I? You know, it's wishful thinking. He hates that he didn't do anything about Stalin now that Stalin has hurt him, you know, and his family, and trying to have them executed. And let's see, think I guess it does make me wonder a tiny bit if IO Interactive watched this movie, because there is at least one instance where 47, the player character in Hitman games, also uses a cake as a murder weapon. Anyway, yeah, so we, at the um I can't believe I'm blanking on what they call those, the gulag, I guess. I think is the right word. We have the thing about, so technically he already served, but they're, trying to transfer him, and he's clearly being treated unfairly. And yeah, there's the thing about, they have to work, and which indeed, horrible part of those, yeah. And I also appreciated the brief and completely gratuitous, not by the film because it's illustrative, but by the character, the ableism that the guy waking them up, says something like, "Are you deaf?" or something like that, and I guess that, because it was a very harsh tone in a place like that. But yeah, let's see, and we have the guy who, if I believe is the guy from the very start of the first movie, the nervous one that is at first embarrassed and then enamored by Kutov when he recognizes him. And you know, in both of these you have this thing of like he's a little green, um, but you've got this thing of like the others have to kind of remind him what the next line is, which I mean I suppose it could also be that he's said it so many times that the words have lost all meaning to him, so he's just kind of going through the motions. But yeah, that is just, it's such an effective bit of like gallows humor. Like, to you or I, this might be the worst day of our lives to be in this camp, but to him, he's so mentally checked out that he can barely even go through with it, you know. And let's see. I think that does bring us to the, yeah, I think that's when we first see the the spy. And yeah, so this only being part one, ultimately this does not really have a resolution. Well, I mean, it doesn't really fully resolve anything, but I felt like the other couple of things there was, you know, I feel like they were building towards something with the spy, where with the others, you know, really compelling stuff did also happen, where with the spy, it's mostly, well, I guess he is the one. It's because of him Nadja knows that Kotov is still alive. But other than that, he does not do that much. Like, we see him basically checking up, making sure that they, or at least Nadja, is still safe. But that's basically it. You know, it doesn't. You know, Kotov goes through more, which, you know, that's not a criticism. You know, if we didn't have him in there, it would feel like, you know, well, why though? I mean, you know, that is the thing. Like, we saw him slit his wrists, but some people survived that. You know, like we saw him, like, he appeared dead in the bathtub, but if, you know, maybe someone found him and resuscitated him, or, you know, something, and we were told at the end of the first one, that was one of the biggest reasons why how I did not know how they were going to do a sequel. The first one ends with the text saying, you know, like, we see him, you know, according to that movie Suicide, according to this one Attempted, but we get text that says that the rest of the family were executed. But as this film acknowledges, sometimes people were supposedly executed, but, you know, the papers lied. They signed papers saying, okay, this person is now, you know, but, you know, for leverage, for example. But yeah, if I recall correctly, the first time we see him is with Stalin, and, you know, there's that exchange, and it's so perfect. Like, again, it's a scene that lingers, and throughout we're just like, something's going to go wrong, but we're not quite sure what. And this thing of like, I'm told you play piano. I have not played in years. I'm sorry. I probably am no longer any good at it. No, no, no. Go ahead. Go ahead. Why did you stop playing? Keep playing. No, 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 no. Keep playing the piano. We're just having a conversation, you know, just throughout this, the because imagine, like, even if he wasn't out of practice, it's a nervous situation to be performing for him, you know, which, once again, Death of Stalin, reminder. But yeah, the I'm not saying that this is like purposefully referencing that necessarily. Both of these are based on real, you know, actual facts from the period. But yeah, the let's see, you know, so that's one element of it. But then you have the fact that Stalin, you know, everyone in the room knows that the spy is telling a lie, and that's actually, that was a book meant to transition between his children's books and more like stuff for adults, but eventually Dr. Seuss did decide against it. But the yeah, like if he plays a false note and then that feels like, why did that happen? Are you lying to our dear leader? And also, like, anytime that he stops, that's also like, he's trying to regain some degree of power and influence in this situation and struggling. And yeah, I guess that pretty much does cover the let's see. I think, but yeah, over the course of it, that is a scene that also does, to at least some extent, help bring people up to speed if they didn't watch the first. And it's also, it explains. Well, let's see. By this point, we've seen that Kotov is still alive, but now it's, completely clear that is at least partially because of the spy, and the fact that it's been discovered. Let's see, and that is I forget if it was Beria. No, I think it was. Yeah, he was very chillingly effective at determining things like that. They also found someone who really looks, so much like the actual, if you look at photographs and such, just, yeah. Anyway, I guess that does cover. So yeah, so he has to go check on the family. And I think that's when we get the, yeah, so the gulag, all the inmates are, they're told they can be, or going to be, in the military. They're going to fight for the country that has treated them this horribly, and in at least some cases, unfairly so. And yeah, just the randomness that, like, he managed to get safe, but yeah, just like this, he might as well have ended up dead like the rest of them. And I think that pretty much brings us to the yeah, and just like the idea that for months he's just surviving, even though yeah, he has to stay hidden. Um, yeah, really, really effectively done. I think the next is the spy talking to. So yeah, he talks to this woman who is spying for him and others on Nadia, and yeah, this thing of he is frustrated that Nadia is not keeping a low profile. Does she understand the words of the meaning? Low profile. Yeah, I screwed up the grammar. We're going with it. And in my defense, it is not that long since I got out of bed this morning. Anyway, I think that does pretty much get us to the. Yeah, so he yeah, and he intimidates the other guy, and yeah, just really underlines how scared people were of running afoul of Stalin's apparatus. And I will also say, so the first one never shows him in person, and that felt right for that one because his presence is permanently felt. In this one, to have him appear, you know, and more than once, I thought that worked well. It would have felt like Like, it's good. It's a way to escalate. In the first one, the spy and the driver and the others in that car were representing Stalin, and here we see Stalin exert influence over the spy. You know, yeah, very very nicely done. And also appreciate, like, yeah, in the first one he also plays piano, and it's a while you know there is a situation with the family, so very nicely done on that. It's a completely different context and impact, and the scenes serve different purposes. So the fact that we have a few elements in common help to really underline the contrast between the two movies and the situations. In so much of the first film, the spy has complete control over the situation. He doesn't even need to rush. And then in this one, he's constantly trying to appease Stalin. Yeah, so he talks to Nadia, and I will say I didn't look it up beforehand, but so there were, well, let's see. I guess it might have been less than a minute actually before I felt confident that that was the same actress. But when she's like smiling or crying, you can really tell that is actually her, and it's really really impressive that there's a number of child actors who, when they come of age, and this is not like me hating on them. I sometimes feel like maybe we shouldn't have child actors, or at the very, very least, we should always take great efforts to make sure their upbringing is still as healthy as at all possible, because it's really not okay to ruin their lives. You know, but at the same time, like, yeah, I don't, or not. At the same time as I sometimes feel like maybe we shouldn't have them at all. I mean, I would really miss if we didn't have The Babadook, The Road, other movies that start with the word the and are followed by one noun, in the case of The Babadook, a neo-noun. Like, they're so amazing, and in part due to the child actors. So, but yeah, um, I try not to judge child actors. I do sometimes judge their parents, agents, people working the set, stuff like that, for the treatment of the child. But some of them ultimately don't grow up to be the best actors, but yeah. Here she's still amazing, and it also really felt like this is, like, the characterization here feels like that's what she would grow up to be. She is not as, she has matured, and that I also really appreciate. I think it's too bad when someone tells a story spanning many years and then they act like, okay, this child would behave the exact same when they're an adult. Who does that, though? That's not really, well, okay, Donald Trump, but you know, it's not healthy too, and it's not necessarily the most interesting. Like, unless you're doing a thing with that. If you're doing a thing, obviously. But commenting on, maybe this is the type of person who doesn't mature, for example. But she is less curious and adventurous, but she is still, when she feels something, she doesn't really hold back or hide it. And that's also such, because these movies just master the bittersweet. On the one hand, it's wonderful that the Soviet Union, even after taking her parents, both of them, away from her, after she was betrayed by someone so close to her, and I really thought the dynamic between the two of them worked really well, because, like, she knows it's his fault. She trusted him completely, and I'm not saying she could have prevented the events of the first, but still, it's a tremendous betrayal. And at the same time, she also understands that she would not be alive if not for his, you know, interference there. But she also wouldn't have lost her parents if not. So yeah. Let's see. I think that does pretty much. Because the thing is, like, okay, if he can hide the fact that that they're still alive, why can't he? Why couldn't he hide them without putting Kotov in prison and separating the family? So, well, I guess I can't rule out that the separation of the family might have been impossible to completely avoid. I feel like I've read once that it's easier to hide that many people if you hide them in different places, because if the people looking for them are looking for a particular group who look like this, then what are you going to do? Just keep everyone away from other people? Because if someone talks about, oh hey, have you noticed how this particular group of people are you know in this particular place, like if that spreads, then that's gonna be easier to find them. But yeah, so in a way, it's nice that she still has that despite all this. But at the same time, it is also, in both of these, she has a stubbornness to her, and that's not me saying that that's like a negative thing. Like, in a way, is really admirable in the face of a dictator. And I'm also not saying like, oh, young women, or in the first one she was a little girl. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just talking about that's that's also a sign that she felt really safe when she was growing up. That not everyone who is stubborn did, but the fact that the mix of the fact that she seemed so well adjusted in the first one, you know. But yeah, it's also potentially really dangerous for her to be this way, as he also points out. And then that thing about like, I think she says something along the lines of, they'd already took everything away from me. Why wouldn't I, defy them? And then the thing about like, this is not safe for your father. Safe for my father. My father's dead. My father's still alive? And oh my God, it was just such, and it's such an early scene. And for the rest, I think we spend the next 2 hours just hoping desperately that they are reunited, and just like, yeah, the emotion was so powerful. I can hardly. I think I'm just gonna have to move on from this. I think I have said everything about this scene, but just yeah, and it is like because Stalin, like other dictators, separated families for sometimes a lot of time, and it's just yeah, like he had dehumanized well, I guess almost everyone really to some extent, and because he had so much power, he did tremendous harm to them, which once again, not entirely unlike Donald Trump. I guess that does bring us to, I think that's the bridge next, which like very effective, this thing of like Katam and the other guy, they're like in the water nearby, because they still have to hide. And yeah, we're told, so there's Russians who are going to blow up the bridge so that the Germans can't use it militarily. And we see the Germans fly over, and there's this thing of like, okay, make sure not to hurt the bridge though, because we need it. Or hurt. Destroy. And then we see this mass, I mean, that's why it's called Exodus. All these people who had to leave their homes, and it's just like, this is one of those cases where it is important to have the scope that it does, because we are not talking about a handful of people. There were, I mean, I don't remember the numbers, and my research to sort of look it up right now, but a lot of people were displaced during Stalin's regime. And, part of it was, of course, World War II. But as this scene really demonstrates, they weren't, that there was not sufficient care taken by Stalin's people to make sure that they were safe, you know. And yeah, once again, as soon as we're told, oh, they're going to, you know, the Russians are going to blow the bridge, like we immediately know this is going to go wrong one way or another, but we're not sure how. And just sitting there and waiting for it. And again, the way that it is, like the payoff, it's again this kind of morbid joke, because like it feels like a fucking Laurel and Hardy thing of like, okay, so when I do this thing, when I wave the flag, you do this other thing, you know, you blow up the bridge. And, you know, like, because, yeah, in some of those, you would always have this thing of like, I'm sorry, what was the signal? This is the signal. Oh, you gave the signal. I'll do the thing now, you know, it, and yeah, it's, again, it's just these random things and yeah, destroying and ending lives. And, yeah, just really, very effective. And Kotov yells at them for doing it. And, yeah, just such a devastating. It's a scene that is effective in part because it starts out sad and then things get even worse. And that is again something I'm not gonna pretend like that's only a Russian media thing. There's also, you know, I mean, I guess I don't want to give away exactly which. I talk about it in one of my videos on, but the first Terminator movie also has a scene like that with a similar element. Anyway, I believe that pretty much. I think the next thing is 1943, and we have the spy, you know, talking to. Wait, is that when he meets the guy that he's also talking to near the end, or maybe I'm thinking of another. I guess I'll briefly talk about, but that was also very effective. I love the little thing of how, you know, you've got that very incriminating document, and then he's like, "Oh, Mr. Spy, actually, if you look over here, was that a quarter behind your ear? Let me just take this paper and crumple it up and throw it away from you. Hopefully you don't notice where I put it." You know, very, very nicely done on that front. Yeah, I guess that pretty much does cover the, let's see. I think maybe, hmm. Yeah, so we have yeah, I think the next thing is Nadia. And yeah, she is trying to, it's the, yeah, we have the ship. Um and yeah, we have the return of the really depressed guy from the first one. I was a little unsure if the woman was also from the first. It was maybe, could it have been there was that young woman who wore glasses. Without glasses, I probably wouldn't recognize her. I wouldn't rule out that might have been her, but it's also possible it's someone else entirely. But yeah, this thing of like they care so much about these, you know, these items, this property, and by the end of the scene, it's been destroyed. You know, busts of Stalin and the chandelier and all this, and just and yeah, like it really helps underline the impermanence, not the impertinence, of these, like, because yeah, you know, I mean, I'm not gonna pretend like you know, I think at least today it's difficult not to struggle with, you know, we do care about the things we own. um yeah, and you have the thing about the Germans flying, and they see the Red Cross, so it's a war crime, and that's explicitly called out in dialogue. And then we have one of them wanting to humiliate I mean, he says he's specifically targeting the captain, but in general, and that really underlines this cyclical nature of, it's just revenge. Like in this case, it doesn't start with violence, or let's see. Uh, there's a term for this. It's not lethal violence, but it is, you know, yeah. Um, it is something that obviously they shouldn't be doing, and it's in response to, the Russians, but the Russians and the Germans were really, really horrible to each other during World War II, and I definitely appreciate, like, the Soviet citizens were defending their territory. And if you read up on, I'm afraid I forget who it was that pointed out, but someone pointed out one of the things about Russia is it is technically not that difficult to access from surrounding areas, and it is fiendishly difficult to defend. And there have been multiple, not always successful, but at least attempts at invasion, sometimes not that many decades between them, and that is deep in the psyche of, the Russian people. And that's part of why they are so determined to keep people out. And at the same time, I'm of course not making excuses for, some of the things they did were truly horrific. But yeah, I love throughout this scene, like, it's so clear, like, no one gains anything from this. It starts with this German trying to humiliate the Russians, and then one of the Russians escalates it. And from what I understand, so he's using a flare gun, I believe at that range, because it's a headshot, I believe that is doable. Obviously, normally a flare gun is not really something you would use to, try to attack another person with like that. But yeah, and so yeah, just cycle. Both sides do something they shouldn't here, because like the others, it is pretty clear to the rest of the Russians on that boat, they're not actually gonna attack us here. And yeah, then the Germans want revenge, and so they sink the ship, and hardly any survive. And then they're like, well, we're gonna have to cover this up, you know. And if that one German just hadn't tried to, humiliate them, then that wouldn't have happened. And I will admit, I was very relieved when Nadia survived. I don't know if, but I hope, if I watch the rest of it, I really hope that she does survive the entire thing, because she's been through so much already. I mean, obviously, a happy ending would be her and Kutov reunited, and, maybe being able to hide somewhere safely. Yeah. I mean, if they were, yeah. Anyway, I think that might be when we have let's see, what happened next with Kutov? I guess it was yeah, I feel like there's at least one more thing I wanted to. I remember him being at this church. He's looking for this important person that he captured. I wouldn't rule out that might have been one of the places where they trimmed something out. Because, like, ultimately, yeah, the voiceover telling us, yeah, that guy's important. Okay, that is essentially all we really need to know. But I wouldn't rule out that was maybe more. There was more time given to, maybe it was explained. Well, again, I guess it's not impossible that it was in dialogue, and they just, like, if there's a really long explanation that requires a bunch of long words, like, a bunch of subtitles will go for something that is, quick and easy to read. And that is also understandable. It is one of those things of like, sometimes we can talk much faster than we can read and comprehend. And yeah, moving on. And there's a limited amount of room for subtitles. I might have to move on quickly to accommodate the next line. Anyway, I think that is yeah, and that was also, he finds Nadia's things and smells the comb and just yeah. Um yeah, like it is abundantly clear that is Nadia's comb. It is not Jeffrey's comb. And then they yeah, there's the Germans above, and it's like, well, we can't go home with this, so they're just trying to knock it loose, foot loose, literally, and it ends up falling, and for several seconds it's not detonating, because if the tip does not hit something, then it does not explode. That is how those were designed to work. And again, it's so random, just the they do make it out alive, but they might not have. And the fact that they were even there to begin with, it's I appreciate that. I don't know. Some might say it's contrived, but really it is. Like, how do you? I don't know how else you underline how many coincidences are definitive, sometimes deadly in war. I mean, hypothetically, you could show a bunch of different unrelated characters where this all happens, but then you don't have the same degree of emotion there. Anyway, yes, that so we have Nadia with the well, yeah, there's let's see. So there's the ending scene with her, but there's also the bit with the farmhouse. I feel like there was something else around here, but I'm struggling to recall exactly. I guess we can talk about the farmhouse. So basically, she hides nearby, and you have these Germans, and yeah, like one of them, I mean, he's probably just stressed. I'm not making excuses. I'm trying to explain. But yeah, like obviously it's a huge overreaction, and yeah, he kills this entire family, almost the entire family of Romani. And yeah, I mean, even the others are like, we cannot work with this. He's mentally ill. And there are so many cases like that where someone just lost control and killed a bunch of innocent people. And again, it's this thing of like, we can tell this is going to go badly, but we don't, like, I did not expect it to go that far. And then afterwards, the girl is just standing there. I mean, essentially catatonic, just completely stunned. And the way that I mean, I didn't count, but maybe it's half a minute where she is literally just standing stock still. And at least one of the other German soldiers is like, what the fuck did you just do? And then, and I love that this was shot at like a distance to really underline the family is lying dead right next to her. And she starts, she or continues to perform. Because like, what else are you going to do? That's you're just supposed to perform. That's how they make a living. She's trying to find some degree of normalcy, of something that makes some kind of sense with this situation. And the fact that they also, like, they could have had her just perform for a few seconds and then stop. But I mean, I didn't count, but was it maybe half a minute of her just standing there performing? And it's just like, I love how much Russian filmmakers are willing to just have us stuck in this really unpleasant emotion because like we just want it to end. And like within a couple of seconds, like we're like we get it, we understand, you know, she is traumatized and she doesn't even know what to do now. But the fact that we just sit there, and again, it does not go too far. Like I would say if it had gone for many more seconds than it did, I think it would have ended up, because this is the kind of thing of like, as it is, it's horrifying. You have to be careful not to push it. 'Cause, anything that can be scary under certain circumstances can be funny and vice versa. And yeah, they do not cross into that. Yeah. And then we have you know, the German goes up to grab an apple, and we can tell from the camera centering the apple, okay, there's something here. Something else is going to go wrong. And he grabs the apple and makes eye contact. And it's this thing of like, I mean, how could she have known that he would go? Because it's one of those things. After a certain while, she realizes, oh, he's coming this way. If she moves, he's going to notice that there's movement. He might shoot first and ask questions never. All she has all she has to hold on to is hope that he goes for another apple, or maybe he's not going for an apple at all. Maybe he just needs a brief moment away from the, you know. But no, he yeah, and he pursues her. And I love the way that we don't find out immediately what happened in the farmhouse. Like we, you know, once there's been several seconds of complete silence, we get the sense that, okay, he's dead. And then, and the, oh my God, this fucking slow zoom in on the entrance and the way it just like stretches out. My God. And yeah, you know, another one of the soldiers goes in there, not heard from. And then a third, and he sees, you know, so it's like a pitchfork and an axe. And that is the thing, like, those are things that would be in there that this young woman might be able to wield very effectively, and that the what's the word? That if she knows what she's doing, she could quickly and silently kill these guys. You know, I mean, one of them went through the guy's throat. Can't really verbally communicate anything at that point. And oh my God, the part where Nadia goes around knocking and crying out for help. You know, like even if you want to say, well, could they possibly have thought it was German? It was a German soldier or something? She's speaking Russian though. Like those two languages are very distinct from each other, especially to someone who speaks one of them. So yeah, they knew and they did nothing. And you know, afterwards it is confirmed. Oh yeah, they were full of people. There were a lot of people who could have opened the door and let her in and chose not to. And yeah, like even the fact that it wasn't Nadia who killed them, like after a while it became, you know, I even before seeing the bodies, I was like, they're dead, aren't they? Which, to be clear, I'm not saying, oh no, because like poor rapist, and no, but that's gonna lead to yeah. And they do indeed, they line them up. Yeah, it's so fucked. And that is again something we know has happened. And they even, one of the places, they locked a bunch of people inside and set fire to it. It's fucking horrifying. And there are historical records of, you know, so once again, I watched this with my father. He said that he knows that that was something that was done to Jewish people by the Germans, but he wasn't sure if it had been done to, you know, non-Jewish civilians. But he did go on to reason, under circumstances like we've just seen, maybe because they, you know, they did take revenge. And and once again, the way that it's so unflinching, because like they could have merely implied, you know, they could have shown someone start up the flamethrower and then walk towards the building and then cut. But no, we see them set fire to it. Just yeah. And yeah, the discussion about like Am I supposed to go? Are you going to go down there? They'll kill you. They might kill them. Or wait, shit. Actually, no. Yeah, I think it was my father who noted they might still kill all of the other. And then she points out they didn't even let you in. And then she starts feeling guilty and tries to go, and Nadia stops her, and they have this discussion about, Nadia says something along the lines of, why should I go on living? I can't live with this. And that again is something, under circumstances like this, sadly very realistic. And I think the next thing is when we have the but yeah, and then she notes, I know why I should be alive. I have to find my father. And yeah, the way that she, discovers faith in God also worked, I thought, because like certainly, finding out years down the line that your father is still alive when you were told he was executed, obviously that feels like, divine intervention, providence. I think that does bring us to the I guess I'll briefly note I loved how much they used squibs. Let's see, I believe that was both the boat scene and the attack on the camp. Very, very effective. And again, like they stopped short of it becoming excessive. Because it is true, like a lot of people died or were killed brutally in a very short amount of time like that. I forget exactly what it. No, yeah, no wait, yeah, I think it's in the big. Yeah, okay. So there's the bit where they have to try to hold this position, and they've got the one cannon, and then multiple tanks show up, and yeah, like immediately again, if you know almost anything about like how this sort of thing would normally shake out. And again, it is like there were a number of times where Stalin would give an order and the people just did not have the equipment to carry it out, but yeah, one cannon against, like if there's only one tank and the cannon is able to fire first and decisively, there's a chance. But as soon as there's even a second one, yeah, and it took only a few seconds, and it felt completely realistic to me as just, yeah, that's how much time it took for the I forget the title, the gunner, I think, of the tank that fired to hone in on exactly what, because they had training, they knew exactly what, even just like I'm not even sure they would need to be able to see the cannon. Once the cannon fires once, they can zero in on it from, you know I guess is it the sound, or maybe there's a muzzle flash, something, and yeah, one shot from a cannon from a tank is enough. And the way that it goes between this celebration where it's like, oh, we're actually going to be able to make it, and then immediately they're just dead. Very, very effective. And seeing someone run over with tank treads, just fucking horrifying. And I appreciated that they did. It was a completely unflinching look at. That is, unfortunately, what it looks like. I think I've managed to steer clear of actual pictures of such, but I have read descriptions. That is what tank treads do to a human body. I forget the exact number, but a tank like that is several tons. So yeah, and some people didn't die right away. And yeah, the this thing of like, so the guy did survive because of the fucking door. Which again, like that was the thing where as soon as we saw the thing with the door, like both my dad and I were like, that's not going to protect him. It's not even metal. What do you think is going to happen when bullets start flying? It's wood. It's going to go right through that. And then it does end up saving him, and they even specifically say, oh, the door saved you. Just this because again, it's this kind of thing that under other circumstances could so easily come across as silly, but yeah, I mean, basically the let's see, yeah, technically it was at least part of how he managed to survive that. And then, of course, afterwards they have to cut off, or rather, Kutub has to, because the guy can't reach it, but has to cut off the is it a belt, some kind of strap to make sure that it stayed on. And the part where Kotov is just low enough in the snow, or wait, was it? Yeah, he manages to survive. That was also really effective. And oh my god, those fucking the elite troops, where it's like, yeah, no, yeah, I'm sure they work well in the parade, and then they immediately duck as soon as yeah, like it's they're all over 183 centimeters, because that's good, right? They look impressive. So let's put them on the front, the Eastern Front, the one of the word. Well, oh shit. I guess it was only called the Eastern Front in Western Europe, wasn't it? But yeah, let's put them in harm's way, and somehow that's no, they are a photo op. They're PR. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate finding that many. They look good. I appreciate that, but yeah, it just absolutely wasn't. And yeah, the guy was like, um, I'm gonna pull rank on you, and then the other guy's like, I don't give a shit about your rank. Just yeah, and it is again this thing of like, because that's also let me think. All Quiet on the Western Front. We see this clash between people who have learned, who are fresh out of the training, who have learned how to, oh, okay, so that technically this officer can't quite be fresh out of training, can he? Would he be able to reach that rank without having seen any? I'm not entirely sure, but certainly he doesn't appreciate how things are here. And the other guy's just like, listen, this is my backyard, okay? You're gonna have to follow these rules, or this is not going to end well. And yeah, just they do indeed die not very long after, and the yeah, like the guy is completely despairing and blaming himself, when it's like, no, this is about Stalin and Hitler, and this stubborn, pointless, like, the fact that both of them fought so hard over Stalingrad. And yes, it is indeed, the reason is what you're thinking. It's because it had Stalin's name on it. There were German generals telling Hitler, it's not strategically important. Let's see, I want to say it was Moscow. If they had taken Moscow, that would have, and Stalin kept throwing people at Hitler instead of just letting him take it. So a lot of people ended up dead that absolutely did not have to. And I mean, in a way, I mean, we are lucky that Hitler was so stubborn and petty, because he was like, I don't like that my generals are the ones making smart decisions, even though it's a win for me as well, because they are working for me. They are advancing my agenda. No, I want to make decisions. And he had no knack for it whatsoever. He one of Hitler's greatest enemies was himself. His temper, his just inability, or perhaps unwillingness, to acknowledge his own shortcomings and just let people who knew what they were doing, because he had such competent generals. We are so unbelievably fortunate that they were not able to compel him away from, and yeah, I shudder to think. Like, I think there's some chance that eventually he would have lost, but the war could have gone on for many more years. He might have been able to genocide more, conquer more, destroy more, kill many more people. And that's one of the things, like, if you meet a neo-Nazi, just remind them, like, Hitler's so deeply unimpressive. And so are a lot of the inner circle. Like, they're just, they are not people to admire. Listen, I'm as far left as they come. I'm willing to, like, I've been criticizing Stalin throughout this video, you know, in general, you know, not fond of dictators. When I look to far leftist thinkers, you know, I prefer, yeah, I look more to the ones who were not dictators. I mean, if you look at, you know, Karl Marx he did not want, you know, a dictator at all. He felt that this was just going to happen anyway, that capitalism would lead to communism. And, yeah, you know, that is like, dictators are by definition a bad thing. And that does not significantly differ depending on the... Okay, there are distinctions to be made, to be sure, but regardless of their ideology, they can cause tremendous harm. And capitalism does not preclude dictatorship. Right now, in a number of ways, Trump is a dictator. That doesn't mean that the country is communist. It's the white supremacist version of a dictator. Anyway, I guess, you know, democracy can help prevent a dictatorship, but capitalism and democracy are not inherently the same thing. Communism is not about, you know, a dictator is not inherent to communism. Yeah, I think I've made my point. So the, yeah, my favorite shot, or edit, I suppose, in both, in this movie, the shot of corpses in the snow, and then as time passes, more snow falls, and after a while, you can't even see. You can't even tell that there's bodies buried under there. They died for nothing. And that again is such, like, that's one of the most important things to take away from World War II. There's a lot of things that we can learn from it, but so many people died for no reason whatsoever. They did not accomplish anything, and we have to do what we can to keep from waging war, you know. And while, you know, I think violence should only ever be the last resort, it usually just kicks the can down the road, perpetuates itself rather than solving anything. What I'm saying is, vote and organize. You can do both. I know some people, I know there are people who focus too much on voting, and people who say that voting never matters, which I'm sorry, I do disagree with. I understand hating voting for someone who is not against the genocide, the idea for carrying out in Gaza against Palestinians. But yeah, vote, organize. We have to stop. You know, don't forget how many of these wars are started and or worsened by Republicans. And also don't forget, you know, corporate Democrats, conservative Democrats do also engage in entirely too much of this. So yeah, I think that pretty much does just leave us with the closing. So yeah, we have Nadia at the yeah, you know, she finds this place and finds the guy alive. And yeah, the way that, you know, like immediately we are thinking, I don't know if he's gonna make it. You know, all those burns. And as she is treating him, we discover more and more. And, you know, she bandages one of the wounds, bleeds through. She discovers another one, and he's clearly weakened and just like, yeah, like even before we see him die, we understand there's some chance he's not gonna make it. You know, and she tries like tough love and like, come on, you'll make it, you know, and and we have that. I think that's where we have the exchange of not of like, do you believe in him or his will be done or something? You mean Stalin? Because that is like there were a number of Stalinists who acted like he was a god. He was the one, and that is part of how we ended up in this situation. That's again, like, and I'm fond of the idea of just don't worship any, like there are ideals that are worth fighting for, and there are people that can trust. Don't worship any individual, and don't act like any group is flawless. We should keep in mind how many individuals and groups start out seeming perfect and end up with them having done, I'm a big believer in, if you keep people honest, then that is significantly less likely to happen. And yeah, I guess that does. It's a balancing act. You don't want to be hypercritical, but you also don't want to go too easy on. There are politicians. There are cases where a woman attained a high political office, and because of misogyny and patriarchy, there were criticisms leveled against her that would not have been leveled against men. And in some cases, these powerful women ended up not listening to good criticism because they had become numb, because they had heard so much bad, and that's not a thing against women. I'm saying that that can happen to anyone if you over criticize. There's a fine line between criticism and just like nitpicking obsession, essentially. Yeah, I guess. Obsession, the act, not the movie. Still need to watch that movie. Anyway, I guess that does pretty much cover. Yeah. So and by the end, he tells her that he's never seen bare breasts. He's never, and human ones will do, and he's never kissed a girl. And like that again is such an important thing to like. I don't love this thing of like, a man asking a woman for that, but I do appreciate, it is extremely important to underline, because a lot of people, they look at that kind of, there's that myth that let's see if I can recall. There was a Latin quote that was I think it was from like the ancient I guess, let's see, I want to say Rome, and it was used during Hitler's reign as well. I believe it was Hitler's, or was it World War One? But in Germany, they, I'm afraid I forget the original Latin, but I'll just go with the English translation. It is sweet and good to die for the fatherland or motherland, something like that. And yeah, that is just not true. That is war propaganda. Um, I'm not going to pretend like war is never, ever necessary. I am extremely grateful that the Nazis were fought during World War II. Which is not excusing. I know some, yeah, that's not excusing the, yeah, Churchill, you know, just to make absolutely clear, because I do appreciate, he did, you know, he at least helped make sure that England fought the Nazis. But, yeah, there's a long list, and I'm trying to close out the video here, but yeah, it's not difficult to find something very negative about Churchill. And I mean, I guess one of my go-tos is the fact that some people think, oh, he just loved freedom. No, he just didn't want the British Empire to be challenged by Hitler. He wanted England to keep the colonies. And yeah, I think that pretty much, I'm willing to acknowledge that there are a lot of impressive aspects about Darkest Hour, where Gary Oldman portrays, one of them is just how impressive the makeup job is, and I liked all the acting. I think I always get her last name wrong, but it has one of the lilies uh, that I quite admire. Doing a great job. But yeah, that way whitewashes Churchill in a very frustrating to me and many other leftists way. I guess that does pretty much cover. But yeah, it is worth remembering a lot of people who died in war. We're talking about soldiers. Yeah, a number of them were, of course, also civilians, as the movie also shows. Civilians just minding their own business. But a number of them were soldiers who hadn't had much life experience, and it is psychologically accurate that there are let's see, I do not remember what it's. There's a specific term for it, but there is a documented psychological um, it's a thing that sometimes when people fear death, it will make them think of sex. And the evolutionary explanation is, of course, that, well, if you're about to die, if you, as if you're a man and you're about to die, if you're a cis man about to die, if you can, and straight, if you can impregnate a woman, that means your line doesn't end with you, kind of thing, So that's basically, yeah. And I really appreciated how respectfully shot it was, and I think it might also, at least in part, be the fact that, so this director, the first, he earlier filmed her when she was a child. So it is, of course, a little uncomfortable to now be filming, because it's not even just like a neutral, which I would argue under certain circumstances is possible. It's not neutral nudity. It's not like, oh, she's like having a bath or something. It is explicitly not for her maybe, but for him sexual. And yeah, she's covering her nipples when it's filmed from the front. And other than that, we see it from the back, so we can't see the nipples. And yeah, like it is a very striking image, and the camera, I want to say, pulls out. Yeah, I don't think it's a zoom. I believe it is. But yeah, as she sits there, and he died right after she let him see, because the just this moment of she does want to comfort him, and he's quite insistent about it, and just, yeah, it's such a, again, like it really underlines just how meaningless this is. He does not go out with some great monologue about, we're going to beat them, I did significant damage to their apparatus of war. No, he's just like, he's acting like a teenage boy. And I mean, I forget what the age was. I wouldn't rule out that he might be still a teenager. And yeah, it's uh, it's just this moment of humanity in the middle of all this inhumanity, and the camera pulling out this thing of like how much longer is this going to keep going? How much more can they live through and sustain their spirit through? Just yeah. I really hope to be able to watch more. Um, I guess that pretty much covers everything. I'm just gonna real quick mentally fast forward through. I definitely did want to briefly note about the opening. So one of the things that works so well about the cake attack is that it has the elements of, again, it has this kind of slapstick thing because he's literally leaning in to smell it. That is a thing. Like, I don't know if this is a thing like people do, but I remember there was a College Humor sketch, which, well, let's see if I censor it. I believe it's called Your Arsler, and yeah, it is. I don't think I'm qualified to speak on if it's, yeah, very much of it, but it has this bit where someone says, you know, this cake smells funny, getting the other person to lean in towards it, and then, pie in the face gag. And I guess in this case, a literal gag. But yeah, it's slapstick. It's the kind of thing you'd see in these, yeah, yeah. Once again, Laurel and Hardy kind of thing, and that fits the goofy. So there's scenes in the first Burnt by the Sun where there's also stuff that's like, well, that's not gonna like kill anyone, but it is like embarrassing or awkward, that sort of thing. And yeah, at the same time, it is. Let's see. I think I already talked about how it's, the, yeah, it is an attempt to kill, so it does have the darker element that, because the first one, like, I really appreciate this decision. The first one has almost no violence. Like really the only like intense physical violence is there at the end. Beating in the car and then shooting the guy who keeps looking for the place, and that signals that this things have changed. And then in this one, it's almost right away, but it is like tonally, it has this kind of silly, goofy thing. Like, yeah. Um, and the fact that, yeah, it also helps show, because like the way I see it, it's just a fantasy. It's a power fantasy. Could have used a gun or a blade or something, but he specifically does this. I don't think it's by accident that this would be a deeply humiliating, degrading way to die. Like, imagine if for the rest of all time, when people think of you, that's where their head goes, at least to some extent. It might not be the only thing they say, but they'll say, oh, that guy who was taken out by someone he trusted because he leaned into a cake and then was smothered in it, that sort of thing. And that is one thing that, so obviously I'm not saying that anything could make up for all the horrible things that Stalin did, but the fact that, yeah, he's also like Hitler. Stalin is someone where, there's a lot of things you can point to and say, these are reasons why you should not. Like, it's fine, you can look at what he did and try to do the opposite, maybe. I'm not saying in all ways, but yeah, like, I don't hate the fact that in actuality, the way that Stalin did eventually perish was not necessarily particularly more dignified than what this movie depicts in this dream.